She was sleeping in row 10, head tilted against the small oval window, the drone of the engines lulling her into a rare, dreamless slumber. For the first time in weeks, Major Elena Varga allowed herself to relax. Her leather jacket was folded on her lap, concealing the faint outline of the scar that ran just above her ribs, a memento from her last deployment that still ached when she inhaled deeply. She was 34, and though the uniform was left behind in her duffel, the soldier in her never truly slept. The plane was a commercial airliner, not a roaring strike fighter. No call signs here, no HUD glowing green in front of her eyes, no missiles slung under wings, just families, businessmen, college students heading home. Elena had booked her seat in row 10 deliberately, near the emergency exits but not so close that flight attendants would hover over her. She preferred quiet invisibility, but invisibility rarely lasted long. Somewhere over the Atlantic, the hum of comm broke. The captain's voice crackled overhead, steady but tight, carrying that rehearsed calm that professionals use when they know panic will soon spread. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? If there are any combat pilots on board any military aviator, so please make yourself known immediately. Elena's eyes shot open, the words sliced through her fog of sleep like tracer fire. Her body responded before her brain did, heart accelerating, adrenaline flooding, palms suddenly dry and steady instead of relaxed. Row 10 fell silent, passengers twisted in their seats, murmurs swelling. The man across the aisle glanced around nervously, as though half expecting someone in camouflage to rise up like in a movie. Elena remained still. She could feel the weight of her choice pressing in. Already reveal herself, or stay silent. The captain's voice returned, firmer now. I repeat, if there are any trained combat pilots on board, please notify the crew immediately. We require urgent assistance. Her pulse steadied. Whatever this was, it wasn't a drill. She unbuckled her seatbelt, stood, and quietly stepped into the aisle. The murmurs grew louder, every pair of eyes tracking her, studying the woman in plain clothes with the coiled posture of someone who'd spent her life in cockpits. A flight attendant hurried toward her, wide-eyed. Mama, are you a broken bar? I flew F-16s, Elena said simply. Her voice carried that clipped cadence of certainty, and the effect was instant. The attendant sagged in relief, grabbing her wrist lightly. Follow me, Captain needs you. As they hurried down the narrow aisle, whispers rippled behind her. Words like fighter pilot, military, thank God darted through the cabin. Elena kept her chin level, blocking it all out. The cockpit door unlatched after a coded knock, and she stepped into another world. The air smelled of coffee, metal, and tense sweat. The captain, a graying man in his 50s, glanced back, eyes scanning her quickly. You flew jets? F-16C Block 52s, multiple tours. Call sign Valkyrie, she answered, her tone crisp, not boasting, just stating fact. The first officer, pale and rattled, pointed to the controls. Bird strike, both engines starboard side. We've got limited thrust, controls sluggish. I can keep her level, but we lost most hydraulics on approach to Gander. Yeah, broken bar. I don't think I can land this bird alone. Elena slid into the jump seat, scanning the instrument panels, her brain snapping into the old combat rhythm, analyzing damage, calculating energy, weighing risks. Commercial airframes weren't her specialty, but flight physics were universal. Wings lifted, engines pulled, gravity never negotiated. You did the checklist? She asked. Yes, the captain replied. Hydraulic B is gone, manual reversion engaged, rudders stiff. She's flying, but barely. Elena nodded. Then you don't need me for theory. You need me for hands. The captain's jaw tightened, but he didn't hesitate. Exactly. She strapped herself in, her hands wrapping instinctively around controls that weren't hers but might as well have been. The layout was bulkier, heavier, less responsive than the stick of an F-16, but her muscles adapted instantly. It was like finding an old rhythm in a strange new song. The intercom clicked again. This time the captain's voice steady as steel. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've experienced some difficulties, but we have trained military assistants in the cockpit. Remain calm. We are preparing for a safe landing. The lie was in the word safe. Nothing about their situation was safe. At best, it was survivable. As the plane angled toward Newfoundland, Elena's mind became a map of calculations. Altitude, wind direction, weight distribution, thrust asymmetry. She muttered quietly, "She's dragging right." "Compensating," the captain said, fighting the yoke. Sweat ran down his temple. Elena reached over, guiding with a steadier touch, bringing balance. "You're overcorrecting. Ease her." "Commercial birds need patience. Let her breathe." His eyes flicked to her. Something passed between them, a spark of trust in the face of sheer necessity. Minutes stretched like hours. Passengers clutched armrests. Mothers hushed crying children. Businessmen whispered frantic prayers. No one knew the woman in row 10 was now holding their lives in her hands. The runway came into view, a dark strip against the gray-green earth. But crosswinds howled, pushing the wounded plane sideways. The first officer cursed. "We'll never line her up." "Yes, we will," Elena said flatly. She adjusted trim, fighting the wind with precise, surgical movements. Her breath slowed, her body fusing with the machine. It wasn't combat, but it felt closing at the edge of survival, the razor of control. The captain's knuckles widened, gears not locking, nose wheels sluggish. Elena didn't blink. "Then we belly it." The words hung heavy, but she delivered them like weather, inevitable, factual. "Passengers won't walk away from a belly landing," the first officer snapped. "They will," she countered, "if you keep the angle shallow and don't panic." The captain hesitated for a heartbeat and then nodded. "Valkyrie, you have the controls." It was the first time in years someone had used her call sign. The sound electrified her veins. "I have the controls," she said firmly, and every muscle in her arms tightened with purpose. The descent was chaos. Warning alarms screamed, lights flashed, metal groaned. The ground rushed closer, crosswinds clawing at the fuselage. Elena tuned it all out. The world narrowed to instinct, to training, to the feel of wings resisting death. Flaps full, echoed the captain. "Brace for impact." She angled the jetliner down, nose barely raised, body humming with focus. At the last second, she feathered the controls with impossible precision, bleeding speed without stalling. The belly struck the runway with a deafening scream of metal against asphalt. Sparks exploded. The plane skidded, shuddering violently, but her grip was iron, keeping it straight, aligned, survivable. Inside the cabin, people screamed, prayed, clutched strangers. Oxygen masks dangled uselessly, overhead bins burst, but the fuselage held. And then a silence. The monstrous grinding ceased. The plane slowed, sliding to a trembling stop halfway down the runway. For a moment, no one breathed. Then voices erupted to sobs, cheers, disbelief. Elena's hands finally released the yoke, fingers shaking now that the danger was past. The captain exhaled a shuddering breath, staring at her as though seeing something impossible. "You just saved 212 souls," he whispered. Her throat tightened, but she masked it with a thin smile. Not the first time. Evacuation began. Passengers poured out onto inflatable slides, faces pale but alive. Emergency crews swarmed, lights flashing. In the cockpit, Elena remained seated for a long moment, listening to the distant roar of relief outside. When she finally stepped onto the tarmac, people stared at her as if she were a myth come alive. Strangers wanted to touch her hand, thank her, snap pictures. She ignored the attention, walking past them quietly, jacket slung over her shoulder. One little girl, clutching a teddy bear, ran up and hugged her leg. "You're a hero," the child whispered. Elena crouched, meeting her wide eyes. "No, sweetheart, I just didn't sleep through the captain's question." The girl giggled, but Elena's smile faded as she straightened. She knew what the truth was. She had left combat to escape the weight of constant responsibility, yet fate had pulled her back in row 10, shaking her awake when she tried to disappear. Hours later, when officials, press, and grateful passengers still buzzed around the terminal, Elena slipped quietly away. No medals, no headlines, no speeches, just another soldier fading into the crowd, carrying scars, carrying silence. But she knew the truth, and so did the captain who'd shared the cockpit with her. Once a pilot, always a pilot, and when the world asks the question, any combat pilots on board, a sleep is never an option.